A man came to see me, 38 years old, says, I saw my grandmother make this tea back in the village. She'd brew something, and my grandfather would walk around happy all day. Does this actually work, or is it just placebo? I hear stories like this regularly, and almost always there's a real physiological mechanism behind them that simply nobody ever explained in terms of chemistry and numbers. Today, I'm breaking down this herbal tea recipe completely, what actually works in it, why 6 hours is pharmacokinetics, not marketing, what can be enhanced if you understand the underlying chemistry, and where the line is between a real effect and the kind of exaggeration supplement sellers usually rely on. Ginger root and hot chili pepper contain gingerol and capsaicin, compounds that in studies stimulated nitric oxide production in the vascular endothelium, the exact same mechanism through which Viagra works. It's important to understand right away, this isn't about some exotic magic plant. It's about two products available in any grocery store, with an effect documented through a specific vascular mechanism, not through mysticism or coincidence. Viagra essentially does the same thing chemically and more aggressively. It blocks the enzyme that breaks down nitric oxide, extending its action. Plant compounds work more gently, but through the same pathway. The half-life of capsaicin in the body is approximately 4 to 6 hours, and it's within this window that blood concentration of the compound remains sufficient to maintain a dilated state in the pelvic blood vessels. This means the 6-hour figure isn't pulled out of thin air. It corresponds to the pharmacokinetics of this specific active compound, and after that period, the effect naturally declines because the body metabolizes and eliminates the compound through the liver, the standard pathway for any biologically active plant substance. It's also worth talking about blood vessels more specifically, because their baseline condition determines how pronounced the effect will actually be for any given person. The endothelium, the inner lining of blood vessels, produces nitric oxide significantly less efficiently in smokers and overweight men. And in those cases, a plant-based vasodilator works noticeably weaker than it would in someone with a healthy endothelium to begin with. This doesn't mean the recipe is useless with those factors present, but expecting an identical result regardless of overall vascular health would be dishonest. As with any mechanism like this, baseline vessel health sets the ceiling on the possible result. The third ingredient in the recipe adds a different mechanism, one that doesn't overlap with the first two, and it's exactly what makes this a systemic recipe rather than a one-time fix. Black seed, Nigella sativa, a traditional component in recipes like this, contains thymolquinone, a compound that in several animal studies and small groups of men showed an increase in free testosterone levels of 15 to 20% with regular use over several weeks. This is a separate hormonal pathway, not directly tied to vasodilation, and it's exactly this combination of vascular and hormonal mechanisms in one drink that explains why folk recipes like this survived for centuries, long before anyone understood the chemistry behind them. They accidentally hit two different targets at once. Now, the recipe itself, step by step, so it's clear exactly what to do. Take 1 piece of fresh ginger root about the size of your thumb, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black seed, and a small piece of hot chili pepper with the seeds removed. Pour boiling water over it and steep under a lid. Steeping should last exactly 15 minutes, no longer. Steeping any longer destroys part of ginger's active volatile compounds and reduces the final concentration of compounds in the drink. This 15-minute detail isn't arbitrary. It's exactly the time needed to extract the right concentration without thermally degrading the structure of the active compounds, something confirmed in studies on water extraction of ginger compounds at different time intervals. Water temperature also matters. Boiling water cooled to 175 to 185 degrees Fahrenheit before pouring extracts gingerol more efficiently than water straight off the stove at boiling point because part of the volatile compounds break down specifically at maximum temperature. This is a small detail most people skip, but it explains why two people brewing the exact same recipe can end up with a drink of noticeably different concentration just because of a difference in starting water temperature. This tea is best taken at a specific time, and there's concrete physiological logic behind it that most people unintentionally violate. The optimal time to drink it is 1 to 1.5 hours before the intended activity, because that's exactly how long capsaicin needs to absorb through the stomach lining and reach peak concentration in the blood, according to pharmacokinetic data on this compound. If you drink the tea right before the moment itself, the effect hasn't reached its peak yet, and if you drink it too early in the morning, by evening the concentration will have already dropped significantly, which is why a timing mistake is usually the actual explanation behind complaints like, "I tried it, it didn't work," even when the recipe itself was made correctly. Since we're already talking about enhancing the effect, there's a modification to this recipe that's usually left out because it requires understanding one detail about bioavailability that most simple recipes ignore completely. Adding half a teaspoon of turmeric to the same recipe enhances the action of ginger and black seed through curcumin, which slows down their metabolism in the liver. The active compounds end up acting longer and stronger specifically because of this slowed breakdown. This is the enhanced version that most simple recipes skip, because without an additional component, turmeric is barely absorbed by the body at all and gets added essentially uselessly, providing no noticeable effect on its own. Curcumin absorbs significantly better in the intestines in the presence of black pepper. Piperine, the active compound in black pepper, blocks a liver enzyme that normally breaks down curcumin too quickly, increasing its bioavailability by some estimates up to 20-fold. The final enhanced version looks like this: ginger, black seed, chili pepper, half a teaspoon of turmeric, and a pinch of ground black pepper, in the same proportions and the same steeping time, and this exact combination works substantially longer than the base version due to slowed metabolism of all the active compounds at once. Before we keep going, hit like on this video. It's a direct signal to me about which protocols men actually need, rather than ones that just collect views out of curiosity. And without that feedback, it's hard to know what to develop next for future episodes. This recipe doesn't replace medication for diagnosed erectile dysfunction of vascular or diabetic origin. Clinical trials on plant compounds like these show a moderate supportive effect, not a therapeutic effect at the level of pharmaceutical drugs. This means that with a serious vascular condition, the tea might give mild improvement, but it won't solve the underlying problem entirely. And in those cases, what's needed is a urology visit with a full evaluation, not hope placed in an herbal recipe as the sole solution to an existing pathology. Hot chili pepper in large amounts is contraindicated with stomach ulcers and acute gastritis. Capsaicin irritates already damaged mucosal tissue. This is a documented side effect, not a theoretical risk from general precautions. If you've been diagnosed with gastritis or an ulcer, this specific recipe should either be skipped entirely or made without the pepper, keeping only ginger, black seed, and turmeric with pepper for absorption. This reduced combination is significantly gentler on the digestive system while retaining part of the effect. The testosterone effect through black seed's thymoquinone is cumulative, not immediate. Changes were recorded after 3 to 4 weeks of daily use, while the vascular effect from ginger and chili shows up after the very first dose within those same 4 to 6 hours. This distinction explains why a single cup of tea gives a noticeable but fairly short-term vascular effect, while a systemic hormonal improvement requires consistency over at least a month, and expecting an instant hormonal jump from one cup is physiologically unrealistic. Ginger and turmeric at high doses enhance the effect of blood-thinning medications and blood pressure drugs. This is a documented drug interaction, not a guess, and regular use of plant compounds with hormonal effects is worth mentioning to your doctor in advance. This isn't a reason to be afraid of the recipe, it's a reason not to combine it uncontrolled with medications without consulting someone first, because interactions between plant compounds and pharmaceutical drugs are real pharmacology, confirmed through clinical observation, not internet exaggeration. After 4 weeks of daily use of the enhanced version, it's worth getting a follow-up blood test for free testosterone rather than relying only on subjective feelings, because subjective perception of energy and actual hormonal levels don't always line up. This is a simple and accessible way to objectively evaluate whether a protocol like this is actually working for you specifically, instead of relying entirely on feelings that are easy to confuse with a placebo effect, especially when you really want to believe in the result. The man who asked about his grandmother's recipe drank the enhanced version with turmeric regularly for a month, and his follow-up testosterone test showed an increase from the lower end of normal to the middle of the range. Confirmation of a real mechanism, not just his grandfather's placebo, who may have simply stumbled onto the right combination long before anyone could explain why it worked. If you made it this far into the video, statistically, that means this topic genuinely matters to you, not just grabbed your attention for a few seconds with the title, and this is the best moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next protocol. Subscribe! I break down topics like this every week and build them into a system, not publish them one-off with no connection between episodes. Link in the description. That's where I answer the questions you'd rather not ask out loud anywhere else.